That's a great touch. So something that I'd always wanted for the services is to have music, right? So music is an incredibly powerful emotional communication medium. And so I grew up Catholic. So singing was actually one of my favorite outlets. And so I was in the choir, and that was a um, huge emotional thing for me growing. It still is. I was listening, so I don't know if you saw in the chat, I found William Tell Overture, but it's the one from The Lone Ranger by Hans Zimmer. And I've shown my daughter for some strange reason, but music is something that really gets me. If I go to the symphony, it's so like overwhelming. It makes me cry. Like it's an emotional thing. So having music for the service to me is a huge step forward. So thank you for sharing that music, because I thought it was great. It's great to just listen and feel it, and do it all together. And that's kind of the thing about music in services that's valuable, is we all share that same experience. And there's a lot of psychology behind why it's good for you and how it does good things. So I'm glad that we now have our own resident composer.
Yes.
Funny enough, how a lot of composers made their money back in the day. So
they all do.
The idea. So that said, there are a couple of you who have not met in person before. So I'm Andrew Caulk. I helped to found the church in the summer of 2018, and we founded it for a couple of different reasons. One of the ones that I specifically was interested in is to heal a lot of the divide in our country, because you need to have a place to have conversations about topics that are difficult and interesting, but there aren't that many places to do that anymore, right? And there are especially not places for those who don't belong or choose not to belong to traditional religion or traditional churches. So I thought, well, why not a place for everyone, but especially for those in the early days who don't have a place currently, right? People who fall in the nuns category. So that's why we started doing this, and it's still going now after almost 2 years. So that's something that's pretty exciting. I'm in the military. I work in public affairs, public relations, and so I do a lot of interesting stuff related to communication and the study of it. So that said, this week I offered up to talk about looking at coronavirus and what it's done to society and what it's done to us personally as an opportunity as opposed to an impact. There's a saying that many of you know, that never let a good crisis go to waste, right? Significant change rarely occurs without some crisis, catastrophe, or some large change that's inflicted upon those who have to experience it. But it also creates the opportunity for growth, right? So talking with Matt, who's one of the co-founders of the church with me, he likened it to a forest fire, right, where a lot of the old growth gets burned, and that allows for new growth to sprout and to replenish nutrients and those sorts of things. I'm not saying that coronavirus is something that we should desire to burn down what is old, but in the same way, it does provide us the opportunity to grow in new and different ways. And one of the ways that I think is critically important is for us to reevaluate the lives that we were living and the way that society was operating until this happened. So, hold on, my wife is signaling me.
Alice is looking for the link. Where's the link?
So it's in the event.
Being Human Church?
On Being Human Church.
Facebook.
Yep. Okay. Apparently, Abbas is looking for the link. So Jen's monitoring apparently upstairs. So I think she's going to message him back. But I think that's what we can do with this event, with this opportunity at the personal level, and especially amongst the community, is think about this as an opportunity to observe what we've done, what we've changed, and what we'd like to keep as we evolve into a new normal. So some of the things that I've thought about, and I've been doing a lot of this here, because while I actually still work, I've had some more opportunity to work from home and just to look at things differently, to spend more time with my family, which wasn't by choice, but has become a good thing, right? It can also be frustrating because we have young kids. Be honest about that. But some things some things that I've asked myself are, one, what really matters, right? To really ask what matters. And one of the things I noticed kind of up front is that a lot of the consumer activity that we do doesn't matter. We actually chose to buy very little, particularly through Amazon, just because there's the opportunity for disease to spread in that way. And so we really reduced our consumer footprint, just out of what we thought was a community good, right? Less commerce that's happening, the fewer things that are moving, the better it is for the spread of the virus, particularly early on. And we found that we just don't need as much as we usually would. We buy things out of convenience more than anything. Some of the other questions I've asked, and I've honestly not capitalized on this well myself, but what could we be doing with our lives? And then the follow-on question to that is, what have we never had the time or really the energy to do? So there are some things that I've finally gotten off my butt and done because of my enforced reflection. So one of those things is start a garden, which I've always wanted to do, but because we move, by the time I get around to it and settled, it's usually too late. And we move about every 3 years. But I was like, you know what? We should really grow our own food, at least to some limited extent, and especially with coronavirus, we don't know what the impacts on the food supply will be. So you know what? Why not? Let's get the garden going. So I just started ripping out grass in the yard, tiny yard here we have here in Germany, and planted some stuff. And it's growing, which I'm very excited about. I haven't gardened since I was a kid. We can talk more about the gardening later. Oh, Chris, I forgot to ask about recording. I don't know if I don't have the ability to record. Okay, yeah, all right, cool.
It
all
is.
Right. And so that time and energy thing, so there's a lot of stuff that I want to do, things I want to write, like I want to write a book, a humanist handbook, to give people, a sort of way to think about different issues we run into in life. But I always feel like I don't have the time for that, or I don't have the energy, by the end of the day of work. It's just like, I can't devote the mental brain power to writing or whatever it is. And so as I've sat around reflecting about coronavirus and so many people out of work, it goes back to the discussion kind of on universal basic income, where what would people do if they didn't have to work to survive? And I think what we would find is that people would create value for other people, right? They would write things, they would produce things, they would make music and art, they would make and invent new things. And so that's kind of the framework that I'm looking at this opportunity through. What could we be doing if we reorganized ourselves, if we spent more time at home? And I've found that spending more time at home, working at home, I've been as productive or pretty close, but also been able to engage more with my family, do more things at home, and get some of that stuff done that I've always wanted to do. So I wanted to offer, those are just questions right now. So I wanted to offer those as questions for us to think about as I go through a few other thoughts, and then we'll talk about it at the end. So evaluating your life is a really rare circumstance. Few of us really have the opportunity where we've experienced either a personal crisis or something like this, where we're forced to sit around and kind of stare at the wall and be like, eating my ice cream, really? Come on, man. Jen just popped up and she's eating my ice cream. She's upstairs. Anyway, so that opportunity to reflect is really rare. I've had the opportunity a few times in my military career because they kind of program it in. Like, you have a few opportunities where you really get a chance to sit down and think. I don't think a lot of people get those. I think we get stuck in a rut of go to work, spend time with the family, watch TV, or do whatever your hobby is, and just rinse and repeat. I saw an interesting video the other day where someone timeline or diagrammed your life, and you've got about until age 18, and then you work from 18 until 65, which is like 2/3 of your life. And I think a lot of people in that 2/3 of their life kind of get stuck in just whatever they do, and they do that for 2/3 of their life. And then you really only have kind of the beginning and end, if you're lucky, that you get to think and experience and experiment and do different things. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us because it is a time to reflect. Things are very different, and we're forced to look at things with new eyes and say, oh, that's different and new, that's novel, right? So they call it the novel coronavirus. Everything is novel. Going out in public with a mask on is novel. Maintaining distance is novel. So it gives us an opportunity to think about things in an entirely new way. How should we interact? Should we shake hands? How do we still get the kind of human affection that we need while maintaining safety and distance? How do we manage sickness and pandemics? What does that look like for our society? How should we start to restructure? And then on the personal level, it gives you that opportunity to say, am I living the life that I want? Does my daily life, the time that I spend from day to day and hour to hour, look like I want it to look? Or do I squander time doing things that I do just because it's there? So I think it really gives us this opportunity to think about that. A specific way you can look at this, and we did a talk a while back on setting goals. How do you mechanically set goals? Like, what are the steps of setting goals and how do you be effective in doing that? But in this case, if you have goals, you can really question, like, how does your life match up with your expectations and your goals and your idea, especially your ideals, right? My ideal life would be X. Like, I would be learning more languages and teaching myself more music and doing different things. But realistically, my life doesn't match up to that. My life is much more determined by how much energy I put into my work, which I do enjoy, but I don't get to do these other things. And it gives me this opportunity to think about which is really a higher priority. I mean, it's something that I'm still wrestling with. I don't have an answer for you. But it does, I think, also give us this opportunity to answer the question, what could life be like? So to me, so my wife makes me go on bike rides, which I do enjoy, though I don't often have the gumption to get off my butt and do it myself. So what life could look like is I could get up in the morning at whatever time is too comfortable for me. I'm more of a late riser in the morning. I still get all of my work done because I don't have to be at work at a time. But then I have the opportunity to go on a bike ride with my kids. Then during lunchtime, and then afterward when they're napping, I can get a lot of work done. And then I work in the evenings. Time spent is still the same, but the total goodness, I guess, I get out of the day is significantly higher. You know, and that's kind of just individually at my level. And so I'd ask you to reflect on the same thing. And then societally, what could life be like? What opportunities do we have? And we'll talk about some of those a little bit down. So the challenge that I'd give to everyone is to start something. Begin with kind of reflecting and resetting, right? And saying, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I was. We've changed these things, but what do I want to keep? What do I want to throw away? What do I want to keep with me afterward or as we go through? And then I'd say do one new thing. So I added a file to the Zoom. It's a COVID to-do list, and I posted on the Facebook as well. And it's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good little list. It's nothing catastrophic or cosmic. It's just, hey, here's some ways to think about your day, and structuring your day in that way, where you do one new thing or do one thing that you need to do and one thing you want to do, gives you sort of a framework to structure what is available to you and structure looking at this opportunity as an opportunity. As I talked about earlier, gardening is kind of the thing that we were able to do, right? So I was like, we're going to do it. This is the thing I'm going to dedicate myself to. So I water the garden every day because it's not been raining here. Germany has had the least amount of rain since 1881, which is when they started taking records for April. Climate change. And then one other thing that's not quite on the list, but you could incorporate into a daily routine is work to change one habit. This is really hard for two reasons. One, habits are always difficult to change, particularly because they're ingrained. Two, it's really hard to do things, to change a habit during a stressful time. There's a lot of research related to smoking. That changing the smoking habit is particularly hard because when you try to stop smoking, it induces stress on the body, right? And then stress exacerbates the ability for you to focus your discipline on changing that habit. So if you don't change a habit during coronavirus, no one should give you the stink eye or look down on you, just because it is such a stressful time that a lot of times we just are going to have to do what we need to do to get by, and that's totally okay. But if you have the opportunity, this is one of those times where, because things are changing, you get to change your routine that might help you to restructure whatever those habits are that you want to get rid of. And then to my previous point, give yourself and others some grace. And I know you guys have talked about this a little bit in some of your other services in the past couple of weeks. But a lot of people are under stress, right? And then when it comes to who's right about whatever it was, whatever prediction or whatever technique to get over something, people really, really hate being wrong. I did a talk a while back on how to win arguments, and you don't win arguments by winning the argument. You don't win arguments by using logic and proving that your point is better. You win arguments in the long term by listening to people, listening to their concerns, letting them express what they're worried about, which is a lot of times, the fear that underlies their position. And then listening to understand, articulating your own position, and then even if you disagree at the end, saying, well, I appreciate you for sharing it. So when people are on board with whether it's the administration or a particular viewpoint, and they're wrong, they're really gonna, especially when they're under stress, they're really not gonna wanna retreat from that position. So we have to also give them some grace. And sometimes that's gonna be hard. And sometimes you're gonna have to correct them because they're giving out dangerous or misleading information, and that's okay. But attack the information and not the person, because most people are always trying to do what they think is best through their framework. And so that's why I think it's important to give people that grace. And then with changing minds and trying to win arguments, you have to give people the chance to change themselves. It's almost impossible, from what I've seen, for people to ever change somebody else. You might be able to convince them of a point, but they have to take the time then to reflect on what it is that they want to change, and if they want to move away from some idea that they previously held. I know, particularly in the time of our politics today, that's going to be a challenge for a lot of people who have really bought into a certain ideology. This is true on both sides. And it's going to be difficult for them to change whatever that is, especially with as much animosity as there is today. And then the last kind of category or point of discussion is engage in the world as best we can. So as you guys were coming online, Chris was talking about having a discussion with the neighbors. Neighbors stopped by and they were just chatting. He's out mowing the grass. Like, it's a small thing, but those little bits of interaction, particularly during COVID, are going to be critically important to a lot of people. A lot of people were already having issues with whether it's loneliness or detachment, and it's really, I think, important for us to realize that some people really need that kind of engagement. Just like I said, Jen and Eric are really big extroverts. They like going out, they like doing things, and that's difficult because they don't have their normal energy outlet, right, or ability to recharge. So we've really got to give, I think, folks that opportunity to engage and create opportunities as best we can. One of the ways is call people you haven't talked to in a long time. This is one of those things where a lot of us are scrolling through Facebook a lot. Like, reach out to that person you haven't talked to in 20 years and be like, hey, I was scrolling through Facebook, I saw you, I just wanted to link up since we're all in this weird COVID, phase. It's just something small that we could do. Volunteer for causes. I know the world still turns, so there's a lot still going on, and ways that we can engage. And whether it's in person or remotely, I think that's something that's important for us to do, and it helps us stay connected with our world and our community around us. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in right now, looking at the news and then just politically, is the right to vote. It's odd that in 2020 the right to vote is still a question, but I think there are really big opportunities for us to engage in that discussion and advocate for people and their ability to vote. With as much tumult as there is today, turmoil, that was the word I was looking for, but tumult works too. I think it's going to be really important for people to vote in the next election. And I'm not one to say this is the way you should or shouldn't go, but I think the right to vote is something, one, that's enshrined in the Constitution, and two, is just the foundation for the way that we have chosen to build our society. So one opportunity maybe for volunteering. Like I said, strike up conversations, and that could be through here. We could just, instead of a service, we could just have a meetup, social meetup on Zoom. Like, there are a lot of opportunities just to have conversations and say, hey, how are things going? Break it into different rooms. One of the things I wanted to throw out as we wrap up the conversation for today is book clubs, movie clubs, where we do something together or read something and then talk about it. Jen and I and a few others have done book clubs before. I really like book clubs because I like to read. It also forces me to read because I've got a deadline that I have to read a thing by. And then we have conversations. One of the great ways to do that, especially for people who are on different times, schedules, is through Slack. And we can set up a little Slack group to engage in. You can do calls and things on there. It's not quite as good as Zoom, but the great thing you can do is chat. So if you guys read a book and you have a meeting and I can't come because it's midnight here, I can always jump back in the chat and read what people wrote. It's also easier to hold multiple threads of conversation as opposed to everybody trying to talk in the video, which once you get past like 3 or 4 is near impossible on something like this. So I want to throw that out as an opportunity for folks, and I'm sure we all have books that we like or would recommend that we could throw out there and have some opportunity to talk more often through those. So that's really my talk for the day. Again, it was just really looking at this as an opportunity. How do we use this forced reflection as an opportunity to change something, do something new, or to make our lives better, either at the personal level or the society level? And then one of the ways that I usually wrap up the services is to say one thing that I'm grateful for. For me, I've got 2 things. So one, I'm grateful that you guys engage with each other, that you still have the services, and that you find value in them. That's something that's just fantastic for me. It's particularly great that Chris has been able to keep this going in addition to his day job, and that, like I said, this is still something of value. The other thing is that I really appreciated the opportunity to be home with my family. The first couple of weeks were pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm used to being at work and not having to deal with the kids. So my wife is fantastic and she takes care of them. And I don't know how she hasn't murdered them yet. But after the first couple of weeks, honestly, it's gotten a lot better. And I think the kids have settled into it, and that's one of the things that's helped. But also we have a bit, I don't know, it just seems to be working out more, and I get to spend time with them and see them and have fun with them, which is a gift, really. So with that said, we can cut the recording and we can go to conversation.